This is near Myrtle Beach. These people say they barely made it out of that burning home. The State Forestry Commission said they're now only dealing with 3 active fires out of the 163 initially reported. CBS News national correspondent Dave Malkoff reports along the fire lines in Myrtle Beach for a closer look at how crews battled those flames.
Right here, right next to his house. What they do is they cut a line down to bare mineral soil. Dirt doesn't burn. Leaves and trees and trunks and all that kind of stuff, that can burn, but dirt does not. So if you get it down to the mineral soil, then you'll actually have a fire line where the fire can stop. That's what they talk about when they talk about containment. Right now, we're about 30% containment. We did talk to one woman who lives very close to an area where the fire got so close to her neighbor's house that it melted the vinyl fencing that was around the house, and it also burned right up to the brick structure of the house. You know where she moved here from not too long ago, in maybe 2022? She moved from Los Angeles County, Southern California, and the reason why she moved from there to here is to escape the drought. And here we are again in a fire disaster area, but this is nothing compared to Altadena or any of the fires that have burned around Southern California in the Palisades. This is a fire where we haven't lost any lives, we haven't had any injuries, and there are no homes that have been destroyed. But it is a push and pull. As the sun hits that, it could just burst into flames at any second, and that's why the fire department is here, keeping an eye on all of this. In Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, Dave Malkoff, CBS News.
Goodness, no major structures damaged, no loss of life, but it was amazing to watch these fires, how quickly they spread in just a couple of hours. So many fires were burning in that area.
And it does have a lot of characteristics, just like Southern California did too earlier this year. When you're talking about dry brush, dry conditions, low relative humidity, strong winds, these are all key ingredients for red flag warning conditions in general. But you have to keep in mind that every single microclimate throughout the states, they are impacted by climate change, and it is real, and it's in our backyard. So we're going to actually dive into that right now, because they do have rain right around the corner as we head into the next 48 hours. Let's start off over into Texas, though. That's where this storm originates. As we head into the coming days, here's what it's going to look like for us. Texas all the way up into Oklahoma, pushing off over the Mississippi and all the way over into the Carolinas within the next couple days. This storm system right here is going to pack its punch. I paused it right next to New Orleans, though, to say that this is also going to cancel a lot of events happening this week for Mardi Gras as well. And you take a look behind me, the severe weather is active anywhere from Kansas down into Dallas, but we could see tornado activity with this. We could see hail and thunderstorm activity as well. This right here will continue to sweep off into areas like Mississippi and Alabama and all the way up into Michigan as we head into Tuesday evening, with snow up to the north and heavy rain and thunderstorms to the south, bringing rain to the Carolinas as we head into our early Wednesday morning forecast. So as we turn the page real fast, starting off just tonight alone, that severe weather outlook really has the bullseye directly over states closer to, or actually just Dallas, Texas, all the way up into areas like Wichita, Kansas, with tornado threat expected there. We turn the page now and you take a look at where the storm is going. It's a fast-moving system. That enhanced risk becomes a lot more widespread across a lot more states. And to add to that, we can also see that tornado activity spread all the way down to the Gulf Coast right around the corner as we head into the forecasted hours for Tuesday heading into Wednesday. More on that coming up in just a bit. But Liz, it is a very active storm that's right around the corner for the Carolinas, so we'll keep a close eye on them and those rainfall totals too.
Yeah, could be much needed relief to firefighters. Thanks, Jess.
Of course.
All right, let's get back to that story that's been dominating the headlines for the entire weekend, really, since Friday. Fallout from the clash in the Oval Office between President Donald Trump, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, and Vice President J.D. Vance. And it sparked this response from President Trump on Truth Social just the last hour. He posted that Zelensky's comment about the war with Russia being very far away is, quote, the worst statement that could have been made, and that America will not put up with it much longer. Let's bring in CBS News White House reporter Aaron Navarro. Aaron, great to see you. President Zelensky says a relationship can be salvaged, though, between the U.S. and Ukraine. Does the Trump administration think so?
Liz, good to be with you. Well, if you just take President Trump at his, at face value, that statement he made, it really seems clear there's a lot of animosity there that lingers after that Friday meeting. When you see White House officials, cabinet members, though, over the weekend, it seems a bit more mixed. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz during the Sunday shows seemed to indicate that we should watch the next 48 hours to see what happens on a potential mineral deal. Called on Zelensky to show, quote, regret for how things went down on Friday, but didn't, rule it out completely that an agreement, at least economically, could be reached. While Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent on CBS News' Face the Nation yesterday said it is, quote, impossible to have an economic deal without a peace deal. So showing and throwing some cold water there. But certainly, if you just take the tone of what Trump wrote in that Truth Social post, an agreement of some sort, some sort of mending of a relationship is hard to see at this moment.
And Aaron, the UK and France both say they will now take the lead on constructing a peace deal to present to President Trump. We know the two leaders of those countries met with Trump last week ahead of the meeting with President Zelensky. What do we know about what they are proposing now?
We know that UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer met with Zelensky just a day or so after his appearance at the White House, and you saw some of the images, gave him an embrace, but also talked about how the UK is ready to put boots on the ground to support a peace deal in Ukraine, should that happen, and to help deter aggression from Russia, from President Putin. Starmer also said that more aid to Ukraine will be given from the United Kingdom, something that Trump has called on Europe to do. And National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, again, told reporters they welcome Europe, quote, stepping up for Europe, but called on them to make even further investments. But even in those meetings that European leaders had with Zelensky, where they acknowledged that they're going to be kind of taking the mantle in trying to get a peace deal done, they note that the U.S. has an important role in this, just given the direct line that President Trump seems to have to Russia and President Putin.
And Aaron, it's likely we're going to hear more when the president addresses Congress tomorrow. We know Congress controls the purse strings, right? So what are you hearing about his address tomorrow?
I'm expecting to hear some topics previewed maybe today or tomorrow, but just given who President Trump is, he may go off script. We could hear him talk about the Department of Government Efficiency. That is an effort kind of overseen by Elon Musk that has really taken up a lot of the news when it comes to the Trump administration so far. We'll also expect him to hear and talk about the investments that have been made when it comes to technology. The White House says that they're going to be announcing a $100 billion investment from a Taiwanese semiconductor manufacturing company later this afternoon. Immigration and getting more resources there could be one ask he has from Congress. That's an issue that voters in our own CBS News polling say they want Trump to focus more on, and we know that they have called on getting more resources, funding from Congress to be able to carry out some of the actions they're doing, including this big deportation plan.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how Democrats react to this address to Congress tomorrow, Aaron. Thank you so much for being with us. CBS News White House reporter Aaron Navarro.
Take care.
And tomorrow, President Trump will address a joint session of Congress, as we mentioned, at 9 p.m. Eastern. CBS News 24/7 will have all-day coverage starting at 7 a.m. Eastern, leading up to a primetime special hosted by John Dickerson, Maurice Dubois, and Margaret Brennan. You can watch that on CBS and Paramount+. And this afternoon, the Senate is set to vote on whether to confirm Linda McMahon as the Secretary of Education. It comes as President Trump has long teased the possibility of closing the Department of Education altogether. At her confirmation hearing, McMahon said the goal is to make the Education Department operate more efficiently and not to defund programs. Still have an update from the Vatican just moments ago on the health of Pope Francis. We have a reporter live in Rome. Stay with us right here on CBS News 24/7. We shall not be moved. Protesters in Maryland grabbed their picket signs and megaphones to take a stand against federal cuts. Federal workers and their supporters rallied outside of their headquarters of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Hundreds of workers, including meteorologists, were terminated from the agency last week. And people flying out of the Baltimore airport today are dealing with major travel headaches after a power outage upended the flight schedule. The outage happened this morning, impacting the main terminal there, and the utility company says it's related to a fire that happened just south of the airport. Power has since been fully restored, but people should expect long lines at ticket counters and checkpoints with over 100 flights delayed. And at the Miami airport, authorities say a couple landed in jail after getting into a brawl with an airport worker. Deputies say they were late boarding their American Airlines flight to Cancun yesterday and then tried to force themselves onto the flight. One of them is also accused of throwing their coffee at an employee. They were both taken into custody and charged with battery and trespassing. To Texas now, where at least 5 people were hurt after a plane bound for Houston hit severe turbulence. The United Airlines jet was forced to make an emergency landing last night in Waco, but about 3 hours north of Houston, 35 people were on board that flight. The man accused of opening fire and killing 7 people at an Illinois 4th of July parade in 2022 has pleaded guilty. Robert Cremo III entered his plea just moments before opening statements were set to begin in the trial. The attack at Highland Park killed multiple people and left dozens injured. Some individuals who survived that shooting were in court today, including this woman who said she and her son were in that crowd and ran for their lives when the gunfire broke out.
Even when you're not injured, just being at an event like this is life-changing. I mean, I can only speak for myself, but I think every moment that we can move forward is a great relief.
Cremo's sentencing for the mass shooting is now set for April. 2 people were killed in southwest Germany when police say a driver rammed a car into a crowd. Police say one suspect, identified as 40-year-old German citizen, is now in custody, and multiple people were hurt. This all happened in the city of Mannheim. That's about 400 miles away from Berlin. Police have not said whether the crash was deliberate, but it happened on a street that's only used by pedestrians that was very crowded at lunch hour. Israel and Hamas not coming to an agreement over a very much hoped-for phase 2 of a ceasefire and hostage release deal. And as CBS News foreign correspondent Deborah Pata reports, Israel cut off aid into Gaza over the weekend, further complicating negotiations.
Ceasefire mediators Egypt and Qatar have accused Israel of violating humanitarian law by using starvation as a weapon after it stopped all aid entering Gaza. The cuts come as Ramadan began over the weekend. For many Palestinians in Gaza, like Fadwa Salur, a mother of 3, there is not much to celebrate during the Muslim holy month. Her husband was killed and her home destroyed in an Israeli airstrike. Israel wants to delay negotiations for a permanent end to the war. Instead, it supports a U.S. proposal to extend the current ceasefire and free half of the remaining hostages immediately. Hamas says this is not what was originally agreed on. Hostage families and their supporters have once again been plunged back into the uncertainty of not knowing if there is a deal to bring their loved ones home. And in Gaza, the future also in limbo as Palestinians struggle to pick up the pieces of lives shattered by a war that nobody wants to return to. And following Israel's decision to suspend aid to Gaza, we are told food prices in local markets doubled almost immediately. Back to you.
Thank you, Deborah. Well, today, the human rights chief of the United Nations said he was worried about how our country is seeing a shift in direction under President Trump. The commissioner warned about divisive rhetoric being used to polarize people, and he voiced concern about a rollback on gender equality and an increase in threats against journalists and public officials.
We have enjoyed bipartisan support from the United States of America on human rights over many decades, thanks to the generosity and compassion of the American people. I'm now deeply worried by the fundamental shift in direction that is taking place domestically and internationally. In a paradoxical mirror image, policies intended to protect people from discrimination are now labeled as discriminatory.
Coming up, President Donald Trump expected to announce a major investment in U.S. innovation. This will be the first time we've heard from Trump at a White House event since that Oval Office blowout with President Zelensky on Friday. You're watching CBS News 24/7. Welcome back to CBS News 24/7. Now to a monumental moment in the war on drugs. The Trump administration has officially designated Mexican drug cartels as domestic terrorist organizations. The acting administrator of the Drug Enforcement Administration is voicing strong support for the move. Turning now to CBS News Department of Justice correspondent Scott McFarland. Scott, thanks so much for being with us. What else are we hearing today from the head of the DEA?
His name is Derek Maltz, and he is making this argument that this new designation that Latin American drug cartels are terrorist organizations is going to help them marshal a lot more resources and ability to stop, or at least slow, some of the drug trade into America, into American communities where fentanyl is killing users, it's killing innocent victims who are nearby and exposed to the toxic chemicals of fentanyl, even killing babies and law enforcement officers who come near the stuff. So they're trying to get aggressive about this, and some of this designation offers some new tools. The DEA hopes they're effective tools. Critics say they could be counterproductive, but among them is that foreign terrorist organizations are not just targeted by the U.S. government, but so too would be the people who provide support for terrorist organizations, people who funnel the money. If you starve the money, some of the money from terror groups, perhaps you cut them off a bit. But there's concern, Liz, that if you make it a crime to give money to a drug cartel, you could be knocking down those who are victims of the cartels, those who need the protection of cartels to seek asylum in America, those who unknowingly send money to families south of the border who they don't realize are associated with cartels. There's also the concern, Liz, that you could dry up some of the sources America has on the ground inside the drug networks.
Scott, I wanted to pivot to another story you're keeping an eye on. More than 1,500 Trump supporters were pardoned on charges related to the attacks on January the 6th at the Capitol. But a case that does still remain involves a Texas woman, Abigail Schrei. Who is Abigail Schrei, and what are the charges she's facing?
She faces sentencing on May 5th for a case that connects to January 6th. It's 1 degree away from it, but she stands alone because everybody who had a hand in January 6th or faced a January 6th related crime pretty much has the slate clean. They've been released from prison or the cases have been dropped, and quickly. Abigail Schrei pleaded guilty to a federal criminal charge. She was accused of sending a racist, vulgar, violent threat to the judge who was assigned to the January 6th case of President Trump. That case was bouncing around the court for about a year and a half. She pleaded guilty, and she will face sentencing for the violent threat against the judge on that January 6th case. There has been no pardon or dispensation for Abigail Schrei, but to be clear, our review of the court filings and the proceedings in that case shows she does face the prospect of a prison term.
Well, also in court today, we're keeping an eye on this. Workers suing the Trump administration over the dismantling of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. What are the details in this one?
At one point, you needed a notebook to keep track of the legal challenges that have been posed against
Yes.
Donald Trump's executive orders. You need like one of those 5-ring binders now, the old Trapper Keepers, because we're up to about 100 cases total with tabs. We have some of these cases, though, Liz, that are specifically about firings, layoffs, or cutbacks inside agencies. We're watching those closely. Among those trying to get their jobs back in courts this week, fired inspectors general, those who were supposed to be watchdogs inside the Trump administration, they're trying to get their jobs back. Those who are part of the U.S. Agency for International Development. How about those who are still with the Consumer Financial Protection Board, that agency that protects consumers from financial malpractice? Those are among the groups trying to get their jobs back. We watch them closely, Liz, because any more resistance from the courts could slow the layoff of more federal workers, which the Trump administration has promised in the months ahead.
There is so much to keep track of, and Scott, we're so grateful to you for helping us make sense of all of it. Scott McFarland there, the CBS News Department of Justice correspondent. Another dramatic shift in U.S.-Russia relations. CBS News learning that the team tasked with keeping an eye on Russian cyber interference has been put on pause. What this could mean for our security. You're watching CBS News 24/7. Here's a live look at Vatican City, where we are following breaking news on the health of Pope Francis. The Vatican says the pontiff suffered 2 episodes of acute respiratory failure today. This latest health scare comes more than 2 weeks into the Pope's hospital stay in Rome as he battles double pneumonia. The Vatican says his prognosis today remains very guarded. CBS News senior foreign correspondent Seth Doan joins us live from Rome. Seth, what do we know about the Pope's condition right now?
Well, Liz, after some relatively encouraging news in recent days, we're getting this discouraging, more worrying news tonight of these 2 episodes of acute respiratory failure today. I have to look at my notes as they just came in, caused by a buildup of mucus and spasms in the airways in his lung. 2 bronchoscopies had to be performed. That's when a flexible probe is inserted into the lungs for them to be able to look around and to do that. The Pope had to be aspirated. They had to remove some of the excess mucus and fluids in his lung. The Pope was then administered oxygen, which we understand through Vatican sources was by face mask. He's been alternating different ways of getting that oxygen, but the Vatican has underlined that it is non-invasive, meaning that he did not have to be intubated. Through all of this, Vatican underlines the Pope has remained aware and alert. And our Vatican sources tell us that there was some good news, which we've seen also in recent days, that white blood cell count has remained the same, and elevated white blood cell count could be an indication of infection. So a bit of more encouraging news in rather discouraging term. Though this immediate crisis is over, this underlines just how complex the Pope's medical situation is. Liz?
Yeah, it has been a bit of a roller coaster there, Seth. What reactions are you seeing from the Catholic community? I know this news just came down, but even over the weekend.
Well, what we're hearing is that it's a tense time. We're hearing it from priests, we're hearing it from parishioners, we're hearing it from pilgrims. As you know, behind me here at St. Peter's Square every evening there's been a prayer, a rosary, around 9 o'clock local time, where people have been coming to pray for Pope Francis. Just earlier in the day I was here on the terrace where we are, and I heard someone call out for prayers for Pope Francis. At Mass, we were there yesterday at where Americans celebrate Mass here in Rome at a church, and the first thing the priest said was, let's pray for Pope Francis. So clearly he is in the thoughts of people, the pilgrims. 30 million people expected to come here for this Jubilee year, many trying to walk through the Holy Door that's only open every 25 years. It's a big year of celebration and penance, a time that is bringing pilgrims to Rome, and many come wanting to see the Pope, and at this point praying for the Pope to get well. Liz?
All right. Seth Doan, live for us from Rome. Thank you so much for that update. Meanwhile, back here in the U.S., federal workers and their supporters rallied outside the headquarters of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration in Maryland. Hundreds of workers, including meteorologists, were terminated from the agency just last week. CBS News weather correspondent Rob Marciano reports from today's protest in Silver Spring.
We're outside D.C. at the NOAA headquarters, where hundreds of people have gathered here in protest of the cuts that were made last week. A lot of layoffs happened on Thursday. 600 employees plus across 17 offices. That's a good chunk, about 5% of the workforce. And we've got scientists, activists, concerned citizens here that are not happy about those cuts, as you can imagine. A lot of signs, a lot of politics involved here as well. But what they're most concerned about really is, what does this mean for predicting weather, for climate change, and things like that. And some of the cuts are going to impact people like engineers and techs that maintain some of this vital equipment, the satellites, the radars that will deliver some of the life-saving warnings that go out to the public. There's been cuts to the NOAA Hurricane Hunter Research Program and to some of the modeling that the National Hurricane Center uses. So Immediate impacts, hard to say as far as what it means for public, but longer term impacts, this will begin to take effects and make an impact on the accuracy and the speed at which we can deliver, or the Hurricane Center and the National Weather Service can deliver those warnings. This is not the only protest happening across the country. There are several like this at other NOAA offices, but this is the headquarters. This is the big one, and obviously Americans voicing their displeasure at seeing cuts at this particularly vital piece of the government. Back to you.
Thank you, Rob. Well, new polling from CBS News finds Americans are wary of Elon Musk and Doge's access to government agency data records, with 52% saying it's too much, 30% say it's just the right amount, and only 18% say it's not enough. And when it comes to what Americans want President Trump to focus on right now, economy and inflation are the top priorities. Meanwhile, we're keeping a close eye on the White House, where in just a matter of minutes, President Trump expected to make a big investment announcement today, a tech investment. The world's largest manufacturer of artificial intelligence chips plans to spend $100 billion here in the U.S. Now, keep in mind, this announcement today will be the first time we've heard President Trump speak at the White House since Friday's explosive Oval Office meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. CBS News Money Watch correspondent Kelly O'Grady joins us live. Kelly, great to see you. What do we know about this announcement so far?
Okay, so this is, as you said, going to be a $100 billion investment over 4 years to build chip manufacturing plants. And it's going to be made by a company called TSMC, or Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. Now, they are one of the most important companies in the world. They have over 90% of the advanced chip market when it comes to market share. Everything from what goes into your iPhone to many, many other electronics and AI-driven products. But this is a very big deal because we had seen the president threaten tariffs on semiconductor chips that were made outside of the U.S., which, of course, TSMC being headquartered in Taiwan and most of their chips being made there would have been one of them. So the fact that they are coming to make this announcement, this investment today, is a really big development when it comes to manufacturing more of those high technological products in the United States.
Yeah, I want to talk about tariffs in just a moment because the timing of all this is interesting. But what does this investment ultimately mean for the AI race as a whole?
It's really critical. So you and I before have talked about how important NVIDIA is as a company. It builds the building blocks of AI. TSMC is right there along with them, and they have very high profile clients in the AI space like NVIDIA, Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, Qualcomm. So having some of these chips, or more of these chips, made in the United States, that is a big move from a supply chain perspective, from a national security perspective. That's actually a number of analysts have highlighted that Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company being headquartered in Taiwan and all of those very important chips being made over there could be a national security risk if there was ever a tussle, if you will, with China. So a lot of reasons that this is good for the AI industry, jobs also being one of them, Liz.
I want to get back to tariffs, though, because the clock is ticking toward President Trump's new tariffs that are set to take effect tomorrow. How quickly will Americans feel the pain of those tariffs? And it's interesting the timing of this new announcement that they're going to start making the chips here in America right before this tariff deadline is set to take effect.
Right. I think coincidence, maybe, but maybe not. Look, the tariffs that are supposed to go into effect tomorrow, 25% against Canada and Mexico, 10% against Canadian energy, and then another 10% on goods coming from China. Remember, we've already got a baseline 10% that was enacted a month ago. You asked about timing. For energy, for the oil that's coming from Canada, you could actually see a price increase at the gas pump, or what it costs to fill up your oil tank to heat your home within mere weeks. So that's a pretty immediate increase. When it comes to other industries, it really depends on the inventory. If that product is already here and they've got a long runway, you won't see that price increase until they're actually taking product, whether it be your beer and your alcohol, or your agricultural products, or your cars across the border. On average, it takes about 6 to 9 months for that price increase to come through. But as I said, there are specific industries where you could see something immediate.
All right, Kelly O'Grady, thanks so much. President Trump's former national security advisor says that President Trump is being played by Russian President Vladimir Putin. CBS News reporter Scott Pelley spoke with Lieutenant General H.R. McMaster over the weekend. Let's take a listen to that.
Vladimir Putin couldn't be happier, Scott, because what he sees is all of the pressure on Zelensky, all of the pressure on Ukraine, and no pressure on him.
The allies look at the video and see what?
What they see is something that's just confounding, a discussion that doesn't reflect the reality of the war in Ukraine, the degree to which this war is a crime against humanity.
Meanwhile, Ukraine's European allies hard at work over the weekend, meeting with Ukraine's president to discuss a path forward. MTS Tayyip has the very latest from Kyiv.
Well, to give you a sense of what's at stake, we're actually at a trauma hospital here in Kyiv, which operates on wounded Ukrainian soldiers suffering from life-changing injuries. In fact, we were actually just in the operating room, and of the soldiers that we've been speaking to who are currently in recovery, they told us that no matter what, they will keep fighting Russia and for their country's freedom, following that dramatic shouting match at the Oval Office, in which so many Ukrainian heroes have told us that they were speechless when they saw it, many of them describing it as a, quote, ambush. But in saying all of that, many Ukrainians we've been speaking to have also said that they are grateful for the U.S., they are grateful for American support, and that they will keep fighting, but they want to keep fighting knowing that they have American support, knowing that President Zelensky and President Trump are working together to try to end this war, a war which has changed the lives of so many Ukrainians. Back to you.
Yes, thank you. Well, U.S. foreign policy is rapidly shifting under President Trump, and some are very concerned. A number of U.S. officials told CBS News that Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth issued a directive to U.S. Cyber Command to stop planning against Russia. Now, the reason behind the pause and how long it will last is still unclear at this time. Let's bring Andrew Boreen in, who is a senior fellow at the National Security Institute and former senior intelligence official. Thank you so much for being with us from London, no doubt. What do we know about the pause in the cyber offensive against Russia?
Well, first off, thanks for having me. And I'm sure you're aware your whole coverage today has got a lot of London in it after the weekend with European leaders convening with Prime Minister Starmer here. So I wanted to set that as a setting. The big conversation here in London is about Ukraine generally. And so in that context, given that the United States under President Trump and a big push to try to start negotiations, it does look like perhaps this could be part of a detente to bring Russia to the negotiating table, could be part of a detente to kind of show leadership, step forward in the negotiation. It's hard to say exactly how it plays out. I think it's very early days, and we have not seen all the dust settle yet on the global context.
Yeah, I mean, there have been years of concerns, though, about Russian influence on American government. I mean, this is a sudden shift, right?
Well, again, I can't speak to classified issues or anything I've had past access to, but I will say that from what I have read in the newspaper, it sounds as though this would be a restriction on offensive planning. And if that's made public, perhaps that is meant as a sort of first move in a detente. When you think about Ronald Reagan and the strategic arms limitation treaties, or SALT I, SALT II, and reducing armaments, I do not personally believe that it is unrealistic to suggest that cyber warfare could escalate in terms of the amount of suffering, lost economic capacity, social disruption, and frankly, physical hazards as well when you look at some of the mechanisms that could be attacked. So again, I cannot speak to it. I'm not in those rooms, but perhaps it's meant as part of a broader negotiating strategy to bring things to a more peaceful equilibrium. I think that would be the best case scenario.
I'm curious because, so much has changed in terms of the United States' relationship with Russia just in the past month. So how could all of this impact the future of NATO?
Well, let's shift over to NATO. Just last year, we were talking about the recent accession of Sweden and Finland into what is now a 32-member alliance. And I think it's really important to look at the historical context of why that happened. Those were both traditionally non-aligned states, meaning because they shared significant land border with the Russian Federation, previously with the USSR, they knew that they needed to be kind of friendly with both sides of the transatlantic divide. Since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine 3 years ago, a lot of European governments, European defense officials, intelligence officials became very concerned about Russian hybrid warfare or Russian malign influence seeping into their borders. So we did see a couple of historically almost 50 plus years of non-aligned statehood with Sweden and Finland, actually take it back 75 years, then running into the NATO fold. So I think we've seen a few weeks of headlines. I think it is considerably premature to start defining what's going to happen with the alliance.
All right. Andrew Boreen with the National Security Institute. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you again for having me. Be safe.
Be safe to you. A rower attempting to cross the Pacific Ocean from California finds himself in the middle of a cyclone. We'll show you the dramatic rescue. You're watching CBS News 24/7. It is our Eye on America. CBS News is in your communities, hearing your stories across the country. We are now into week 7 of President Trump shaking up and downsizing the federal workforce. It's something that surprised even his closest supporters. CBS News senior national correspondent Mark Strassman went back to Wisconsin, which Trump narrowly won, to find out how people who voted for him feel about the mass firings.
ABC needs corned beef hash. At Frank's Diner in Kenosha. Here's a table, 2. The t-shirts say it all. Order what you want, eat what you get. I got a table 10. We wanted a conversation with supporters of President Trump. Do you support the downsizing? Absolutely. About the White House drive to shrink American government. We got what we ordered.
They're spending all our money, and there's too many people in there.
And when they talk about waste and fraud and abuse, you believe that's going on? Oh, hell yeah. Why Kenosha, Wisconsin? It's a purple city in a purple state. Donald Trump won Battleground, Wisconsin last November, but just barely, by a single point. He won Kenosha County by 6 points.
The war is costing us billions of dollars.
In the back of Frank's, we found this reunion of former factory workers. Show of hands, how many of you guys voted for Trump? All but one. Among them, Eric Davidson, who believes many government agencies and workers accomplish little.
Are you doing your job, or are you just making paper airplanes?
And you think there are a number of government employees who are flying paper airplanes?
Yeah, I'm just going to come in here and put my time in and get my pension and go out.
Bruce Wilson is the only one at the table who didn't vote for Trump. When you hear this conversation, do you agree with them, these guys?
In some respects, I do.
So the idea of shrinking government, do you support that?
Clearly, if there's waste, there should be some shrinkage there.
What hits home for the people we met in Kenosha, Trump's repeated message.
Fraud, waste, abuse, fraud, waste, abuse.
Fraud, waste, abuse, fraud, waste, abuse. Just hearing that over and over again seems to have resonated.
Yes, and that repetition is very persuasive.
At Northwestern University, Professor Eric Nisbet studies public opinion and strategic messaging.
You know, a lot of people judge the veracity of information by how often they hear it. It's not proof, it's allegations, but that's enough for people.
In a recent Reuters Ipsos national poll, 42% of Americans support Trump's push to downsize government. Still, 53% oppose it, including Democrat Steve Farrell. Are you worried that services could be cut back?
I'm really worried about that more than anything, yes.
And which services are you most worried about being cut back?
Mail, for one, Social Security services, Medicare, Medicaid, all of them.
But in this converted railroad car, Many of the customers we met simply feel the president is on the right track.
He's getting rid of a lot of corruption.
Have you seen any proof of corruption?
Well, not me myself, but I can see it throughout the news on both sides.
They're generally eating up what's happening in Washington, even if proof is not on the menu. For Eye on America, Mark Strassman in Kenosha, Wisconsin.
I want to take you now to New Orleans' famous Bourbon Street, where the city is gearing up for Fat Tuesday celebrations tomorrow. But unfortunately, in nearby Jefferson Parish, a popular destination for Mardi Gras, officials say no to parades. They say it's because of unsafe weather conditions. Although they say they are trying to reschedule for later on in the week. Hopefully they can do it. Jess, what can you tell us about what's going on there weather-wise?
Yeah, well, right now you head over to states like Texas all the way up into, Oklahoma. And we're starting to see severe weather develop into the evening hours tonight. But that exact same storm system will sweep throughout New Orleans and all the way off throughout the south as we head into our Tuesday and Wednesday forecast. And that's going to cause a lot of issues. There's tornado activity possible, thunderstorm activity with hail, damaging winds. And so it makes sense why they're just being precautious and canceling ahead of time. I know it's hard when you see that live look and think to yourself, it's beautiful out there right now. But this is a fast moving storm. So we're going to actually show you that right now just below me. I'm going to pull up the map and kind of give you a good picture as to what's to come. Now we look all throughout Texas and Oklahoma. Like I said, the origin of the storm system. As we head into the coming days, watch how it just highlights all throughout the south, bringing snow to the north and heavy storms to the south. I paused it right here just to show you it sweeps throughout New Orleans as we head into our Tuesday and Wednesday forecast. Let's time this out behind me. You start over into Texas. You see light to moderate rain developing into the next couple hours or so. You watch this really start to intensify as we head into Tuesday morning, though. Anywhere from Iowa all the way down into Louisiana, across the Mississippi, just into the Tuesday evening forecast around 9:30. That's when it sweeps throughout these communities, continuing to push off to the Carolinas, where right now fire activity is the big story for them. That's going to give them plenty of rain as we head into our Wednesday setup. But let's pull it right back to tonight. That enhanced risk, just the center of this bullseye for the severe weather outlook, is pretty much centralized over Dallas, all the way up in Oklahoma City. But you turn the page into our forecasted hours tomorrow. Watch how this, especially with our tornado risk, sweeps over into states anywhere from Missouri all the way down into the south coast of Alabama, Mississippi, and New Orleans, too. That enhanced risk really starts to intensify. We'll keep you updated on that. For now, back to you.
Jess, thanks so much. All right, you got to see this. A man trying to row across the Pacific Ocean by himself was stranded for 3 days after getting caught in a cyclone. Luckily, rescue crews were there to help. The rower, a 44-year-old man from Lithuania, began his 7,500-mile journey in October, setting off from San Diego. He was just days away from reaching Brisbane, Australia. Whoa, when he ran into stormy seas from tropical cyclone Alfred. He activated his emergency beacon, and after just a few days, this naval boat was able to reach him and hoist him up. Conditions were so dangerous, the crew couldn't recover his boat and could only save 2 oars and some personal items. Luckily, rescue crews are taking him to Sydney to rest. Unbelievable rescue operation, though. Can you imagine rowing by yourself from California all the way to Australia? Unbelievable.